sustainable throughout your building of fund balances in the end. So those two plans can be funded either individually or together, but if they're funded together, it would require a borrowing. I will say that your borrowing, when you look at it as a percent of revenues, is rather reasonable for a utility. It's hovering in the 20 to 25% level, your debt service as a percent of your overall rate revenue, which is not unusual, and it's fairly normal. When you get up around 40% is when we start getting concerned about a utility having excessive borrowing. So even with this borrowing, you would be in a good sweet spot, if you will, in terms of how a utility you would expect to see a utility. It's a balance of borrowing and cash funding. You do have intergenerational equity issues to consider, where borrowing for utilities sometimes is appropriate because you don't necessarily want to burden the current ratepayers with all the cost of something that's going to benefit ratepayers for 20 or 30 years. So sometimes borrowing does help you do that. Now the sewer fund. Let's look at the sewer fund. We have the green bars and the blue bars right now represent no April 2020 plan. That rate requirement there is 5.25% each year to have a sustainable plan. And you can see you start with rather healthy fund balances that get slowly built down in these early years, but then the cumulative effect of those rate revenue increases will level that cash flow out. So this is kind of a nice plan that shows you how you can use reserves in combination with rate increases to bring your reserves down to the levels you would like to have, and then have a sustainable plan going forward. So that's a baseline for the sewer plan at this point. Then we look at the all-inclusive capital plan, which for the sewer is really only the 2020 is the only project we're bringing in. But there's two big capital bars you see there come in 2015 and 2019. And the rate plan that's necessary for that is 5% a year.
8%.
I'm sorry, 8% a year. Thank you, Lisa. I need to bring my other down. With a reduction to 2% in 2020. Right. Okay. So, and that plan would give you a sustainable future with no borrowing. It draws reserves down a little bit more because you have the additional capital cost, but you have a sustainable plan, keeping your reserve balances very close to your minimum requirement, slightly above those. But the good thing about it is they're not decreasing. As long as they're staying constant or increasing, which is because your cash flow and your cash in and your cash out are fairly coincident lines, you have a sustainable plan. Now, when you look at a comparison of you to your peers, you're where the orange or yellow arrow is there, and you're kind of near the top of the middle in comparison to all the other communities that are in this survey. We have, can everybody see that? I guess you can see those names okay. And that's for water and sewer together for a single family residential customer using 5,000 gallons. The way we do this is we survey each of these communities and we get what their rates are, and we apply their water and their sewer rates to a residential customer using 5,000 gallons and come up with the total monthly bill. So that's the monthly bill for water and sewer service, and in Lake Worth there is $59.13. When you look at how it is on water and sewer separately, on water, you're kind of near the top. You're the fourth highest on the water side. But on sewer, you're down near the bottom. And the net combination of those brought you folks up just slightly higher than the middle on the comparison. These comparisons, I would caution everyone about that because you have a reverse osmosis process, which is a fairly expensive process. Others may not. So it's very difficult to make apples to apples comparison. Everybody wants to see it though, so we show it, but I would caution you to not get too concerned. I mean, if you were maybe the very top one, maybe, but you're hanging right in there in the middle, and I think given that you do have a reverse osmosis process, which is an expensive process, that you're in pretty good shape on a comparative survey. Would you like to entertain questions as I go? I only have a few more slides.
Just if you'll finish, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
What this slide shows you is, it's interesting to say what happens in the industry. And we all think of the CPI as that number that's 1 3/4%, 2%, 2.5%. But the CPI, the Computer Price Index, is made up of about 200 sub-indices. one of which is called the Water and Sewerage Maintenance Series. And what that is a measure of the cost of water and sewer service to a household using 5,000 gallons of water across the country on average, and they keep these records for 50 years. When you look from 2004 to 2014, that has increased at a rate of about, over the last 5 years, 6.3% per year, and over 10 years, about 5.9%. And if you go way back, it's probably a little over 5%. This is the annual number, so if you kind of drew a straight line through that number, 5% or slightly under 5% is the kind of the cost of living, if you will, for a utility around the country, the cost of living increase. So the plans that we showed you were hovering very close to the industry average on all the different choices you have. If a utility can go over a long-term period of time and be sustainable with rate increases in the 5± % per year range, it's what you see around the country. It is what has happened for the last 50 years around the country. So, and I think that may be my last slide. It is, except for discussion. So,
Commissioner McAvoy?
Just